Week 14 focused on what you can do as an individual to help achieve a sustainable energy future. In your course material and discussions, you explored the answers to these questions related to citizen action for a sustainable energy future. Why is it important to take individual action? What is nexus thinking, and why is it important? How much energy and other resources do you currently use? How does your energy resource use compare to other people in the same country and in other countries? What can you do at home, at work, and when you travel to reduce and/or change your energy behavior to be more sustainable? What can you do on a larger scale, beyond changing your individual energy behavior, to improve energy sustainability in your community and nation? What are some current barriers to meeting the energy goals you want to set for yourself, and how do you plan to overcome them? One reason that individual action is so important to improving energy sustainability is because of how much energy is currently wasted. Now, a lot of this is wasted as a result of heat losses that are a necessary part of any thermoelectric power cycle, which has physical limits on its efficiency. But there is also a lot of waste in electricity transmission and distribution, transportation fuel evaporation, and activities such as leaving lights on when not in use or not unplugging electronics that suck power from the grid even when they're turned off. These may seem like small things, but they add up to a lot of waste. And there is a hidden benefit to individual action beyond the actual efficiency improvements and energy savings, and that is improved energy literacy among the decision makers of the future. As more and more people become aware of energy issues and take action to help solve them, they perpetuate greater global understanding of these issues, which will lead to faster change. So there is almost this exponential power in individual action that can be far more effective than any big policy the government could enforce. Because individual energy action is so powerful, it is important not to limit it to just energy issues, but rather to expand it to the other critical issues with which energy is inexorably linked: food and water. Nexus thinking refers to thinking about the relationships between food, water, and energy. There are three main considerations here: water as an input to energy production and industry, as well as to food production; energy as input to clean water, sanitation, and food; and access to food, energy, clean water, and sanitation being a basic human right. Let's start with water as an input. Most of our water goes to thermoelectric power plants and to irrigation. Keep in mind this graph is in billions of gallons per day. That's a lot of water. There are two sides to this. One, the water industry is energy intensive, but also the energy industry is water intensive. Now you may think, well, what's the big deal? It's all part of the renewable water cycle, right? Wrong. In some cases, the water that is used will be treated and returned to a fresh water body to be used again. But in most cases, this water consumption refers to water that is removed through evaporation from one region to another region, causing local issues, especially in deserts, or water that is used in a way that is contaminated and cannot be returned to its fresh state. As you can see here, a lot of water is considered consumed, meaning unusable afterward, and most of this comes from thermoelectric power plant operations. So how is water used in energy production? There are three main ways: for cooling in thermoelectric power plants, in the extraction and processing of fuel and resources, and through hydroelectric power. Most energy-related water use comes from cooling in thermoelectric power plants. Contrary to popular opinion, that is not a nuclear reactor. It's a cooling tower. The same cooling tower you would find at a coal plant, a natural gas combined cycle power plant, a concentrated solar power plant, and at a nuclear power plant as well. Any power plant that uses heat to generate electricity will have one of these. This graph shows the range of water use by different technologies. Wind and solar PV are at 0 because they don't use heat in the same way as the others, so they don't need to use one of these cooling towers. Plants can choose to use dry cooling instead of this tower, which is considered wet cooling. Dry cooling can significantly reduce the water consumption from a thermoelectric power plant, but it is a little more expensive and a little less efficient, and there are currently no policies requiring the use of dry versus wet cooling, so not many power plants use them. Water is also used to extract and process fuel for use in power plants. This graph compares the water use for these activities by fuel type, with ethanol being the most water intensive and natural gas being the least. Although this does not include natural gas from fracking, which uses a lot more water than what is shown here. Water is also evaporated from the reservoirs of big dams like the Three Gorges Dam in China, which is the world's biggest dam and biggest power plant, displacing 1.13 million people in order to feed China's growing energy demand and reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. Although that might sound very nice, reducing the need for fossil fuels, as you know, there are some serious issues associated with large dams like this, which increase with the size of the dam. Environmental impacts include landslides, water pollution, potential earthquakes, fish displacement, and impacts to breeding cycles. Human impacts include displacement of communities, job losses, and changes to the aesthetic landscape they are used to, not to mention impacts to cultural sites. This table presents a nice summary of the impacts associated with water as an input to energy and the connections to water quality through pollution as a result of energy production activities. On another side of the nexus, water and energy are both inputs to food production, and food production has become more energy and water intensive over time. In fact, although per capita energy use decreased 1.8% in a 5-year period, food-related energy use increased 16.4% in the same period. And this increase in energy use for food production appears to be happening at each stage of the food supply chain. Today's food system is dependent on intensive inputs, some of which may become too costly to extract or produce in the future. 19% of our total fossil fuel use is dedicated to food production activities, including agricultural production and post-farm activities such as processing, packaging, distribution, and storage, corresponding to about 2,000 liters of oil per person per year. And a lot of that energy is wasted because we waste a lot of food, 40% globally. That's a huge number. In developing countries, this is because of insufficient infrastructure to get food to market, so a lot of it spoils along the way without proper packaging and refrigeration. In developed countries, most of this food waste is from food getting thrown away because it didn't sell at grocery stores or restaurants, or because people buy too much food and it spoils before they get a chance to use it. And when we waste food, we waste the inputs as well, the energy and the water. This is not to say that you need to become a part of the Clean Plate Club to be more sustainable. For health reasons, you should never eat more than you need or want to just because you don't want to waste. But maybe we should be smarter about our purchases. Buy and make less food at a time to avoid spoilage. Make more frequent trips to the supermarket. However, this needs to be balanced with the type of transportation we use to get there. Energy intensity in food varies by food type, providing some opportunities for individuals to take action by choosing less energy-intensive foods when they eat. These energy implications have implications for greenhouse gas emissions as well. One study in the journal Energy Policy shows that food-related greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced 22% to 26% by switching to a vegetarian or vegan diet, respectively. In addition to thinking about what you eat, it is also important to think about where it comes from. Purchasing an organic apple from Chile at a grocery store in Maine may actually be worse for the environment than buying a non-organic apple that was grown in Maine or New England. This is because the distance the food product travels to market makes a difference for the amount of energy the food product requires. However, the mode of transportation matters as well. In the apple example, at least from an energy perspective, the choice is simple. The apple from Maine is better for the environment because it didn't have to travel as far, and it probably arrived by truck instead of plane. However, if you are eating organic for health reasons and not environmental reasons, you may still want to choose the Chilean apple. Although beware that different countries and different states have different standards for what is considered organic. As I mentioned, food is also very water intensive, but this also varies by some of the water and energy trends overlap. So if you choose to reduce your beef consumption, for example, you end up saving water and energy at the same time. This Macometer diagram puts some of these numbers into perspective by showing the number of gallons of water needed to produce each portion of a Big Mac. Dairy and meat top the list, while the vegetables are much less water intensive. This is not to say that you need to go completely vegan in order to achieve a sustainable energy future. But the more people who reduce meat and dairy consumption and replace it with less energy and water-intensive alternatives, the less water and energy will be required for feeding a growing world. Part of the reason why the food and energy industries are so water-intensive is because water is often treated as a free common pool resource that is not something we can exclude, but something that we end up competing over in times of scarcity. However, since we don't price it accordingly, it gets overused or used inefficiently, leading to shortages, which are especially important in desert areas. Some solutions to these water and energy-related food issues include choosing diets that include less water or energy-consuming foods, which usually tend to be healthier unless potentially we are talking about the organic apple from Chile versus the non-organic apple from Maine. Implement programs and policies to reduce food waste from restaurants and other retail locations. Individually buy smarter to avoid waste from food spoiling before the code date, and somehow adjust the price of water to encourage more efficient uses, or put stricter regulations in place to reduce waste. Consumers have a lot of purchasing power. If enough people start purchasing less water and energy intensive food, growing their own food at home, and altering their diet to eat less meat and dairy, the market will respond to changing demand. So that covers water and energy as inputs. Just briefly, I want to discuss this third point of Nexus thinking, that access to energy, food, clean water, and sanitation should be a basic human right. In the United States, nearly 3% of annual electricity consumption can be attributed to wastewater treatment. About $8 billion per year is spent on just the electricity used in pumps and aeration to treat wastewater. So when you save water, you save energy too. Individually, on average, we use nearly 600 liters of water per person per day in the United States for drinking, cooking, and sanitation, meaning flushing toilets, bathing, cleaning, etc. This differs around the world, with people in the UK using about 150 liters per day, and those in developing countries using only about 10 liters per day or less. And in the United States, this is especially obscene in places like Phoenix, Arizona, a desert area, where people use about 300 liters per person per day. Or Las Vegas, another desert area, where things like this happen, the dancing fountains at the Bellagio Hotel and Casino. Now, I'm not saying this isn't beautiful and impressive. I very much enjoyed watching it when I went to Vegas several years back. But I also had this squirmy, guilty feeling in the pit of my stomach as I watched it, because it has to be one of the clearest examples of waste, excess, and unsustainably managed resources in a land with very few resources to begin with. What are the long-term effects going to be for a civilization that values energy and water so little that this is allowed to happen in a desert area? This is especially alarming when viewed in the context of other images and statistics around the world. 2.5 billion people in the world do not have access to adequate sanitation. Almost 1 billion people lack access to safe drinking water. 1 million children literally dying for a glass of water and a toilet free of diseases. And based on current trends over the next 20 years, humans will use 40% more water than they do now. Where will it come from? And where will the energy to treat it and pump it come from? This example of waste is appalling from an energy perspective as well, when it is put into the context of a growing global problem known as energy poverty. It turns out there is a direct link between access to energy and improved standards of living, captured in this diagram as the Human Development Index, which is an indicator of standard of living based on life expectancy, education, and gross domestic product. Energy is crucial to reducing poverty and hunger, improving health, increasing literacy and education, and improving the lives of women, in particular because women in developing countries devote most of their time to collecting, processing, and using traditional fuel for cooking. In India, 2 to 7 hours each day can be devoted to the collection of fuel for cooking. In rural sub-Saharan Africa, many women carry 20 kilograms of fuel wood, an average of 3 miles every day. This is time that could be spent on childcare, education, socializing, or income generation. The larger global problem of energy poverty can be defined as a lack of access to modern energy services. These services are defined as household access to electricity and clean cooking facilities, like fuels and stoves that do not cause air pollution in homes. Modern energy services are crucial to human well-being and to a country's economic development. And yet globally, over 1.3 billion people are without access to electricity, and 2.7 billion people are without clean cooking facilities. More than 95% of these people are either in sub-Saharan Africa or developing Asia, and 84% are in rural areas. In general, poor people spend up to a third of their income on energy, mostly to cook food, and the World Health Organization estimates that 2.5 million women and young children in developing countries die prematurely each year from breathing the fumes from indoor biomass stoves. This is not just a developing nation problem either, although developing nations experience it more harshly and across a larger percentage of the population. Fuel poverty in the United States affects about 16 million households who spend more than 10% of their income on household energy needs. In 2005, 36% of fuel-poor households had incomes higher than the federal poverty guideline, and 5% were ineligible for the federal low-income home energy assistance program. So every winter we see stories like this one in the Bangor Daily News about people who have to choose between food and fuel in the cold winter months. As you can see, Nexus thinking incorporates a wide variety of issues, of which we have barely scratched the surface. So let's summarize. Energy, food, water, they are all connected, and all are being overused and used inefficiently. They are also all facing scarcity issues in the future if current consumption patterns continue. As consumers, we need to think about all of the ramifications of our diets and product choices, and remember that we also impact those who have a lot less than we do. Maybe not directly, but by using up resources that may not be available to others in the future, and by currently serving as an example of waste and excess that others may try to emulate in the future, further contributing to the problem. Okay, so now you are ready to think about the nexus. But before you can make changes in your own life to help the nexus, you first need to figure out how well you're already doing and what you need to and have the ability to change. You calculated your energy use, carbon footprint, and ecological footprint using these calculators and discussed your results with your groups. The ecological footprint calculator gave results in terms of how many Earths it would take to sustain the current population at the consumption levels you are currently meeting. Last year I got a result of 4.67 Earths, which is below the US average of 6.35. That makes me feel pretty good, being below the average. But really, more than 4 Earths? Clearly there is room for change in my life, especially if you think in terms of setting an example for people in developing nations who will hopefully soon be achieving the same standard of living enjoyed by most of this country. Does this standard of living have to have such a large footprint? Certainly not, as other developed nations are able to have a high standard of living with less of an impact. Of course, the calculators are only as accurate as the information you choose to enter and the time you choose to take with them, and the results are only as good as the assumptions upon which they are based. For example, this calculator is based on calculations of a country's average consumption, and then changes to that average based on the answers to the questions that you answer. But that is assuming that an individual has an accurate understanding of their behavior in relation to average behavior. I mean, do you really know how much meat you eat compared to the average person? Or in the case of the National Geographic calculator, do you really know what percentage of your energy is from renewables? How do you calculate that? Do they mean percentage of energy used for home heating, electricity, transportation, or from all three? Does the electricity usage already include your state-based renewable mix or the national average? Do they expect you to separate out the renewable energy input to your electricity mix, or just consider extra renewable energy you purchase through a voluntary monthly add-on fee? Regardless of how they expect you to calculate this seemingly simple value, each calculator seems to handle the electricity mix a little differently. So you have to read the fine print to understand what sources of energy they assume power your electricity in these calculations. Another disadvantage of these calculators is some of the things being counted in your footprint are really not directly attributable to you. They are because of where you live. Well, it is tricky to break the world into appropriate geographical areas for each person. For example, most of the food we eat isn't grown in Bangor. So are we responsible for the infrastructure between us and the origin of that food? Only to the extent that the calculator allows you to specify whether you buy locally, and to the extent that you know how much you buy locally. Some of the calculators ask you about organic food, but may not actually ask about buying local food, which may be more important for energy, water, and climate change concerns. When we compare the EPA greenhouse gas calculator and the footprint calculators, we find some very important differences, some of which are advantages, look at the plus signs here, and some of which are disadvantages, see the minus signs here. For example, the footprint calculators, like the one from the Global Footprint Network, tend to use national average electricity mix data, which means that even though you live in Maine, which generates 50% of its electricity from renewables, in the Global Footprint calculator, your impact will be calculated as if nearly 40% of your electricity comes from coal, the national average, even though less than 1% of Maine's electricity is from coal. For the reasons just outlined, there is not universal acceptance and love of the ecological footprint. Check out this article if you want to learn more. But despite all of these concerns and disadvantages, the calculators are good for helping us visualize the larger picture with regard to the choices we make and the impacts they have on the rest of the world. They are also useful for giving us suggestions for how to change our behavior to become more sustainable. For example, these suggestions are from the EPA Greenhouse Gas Emissions Calculator. On the road, properly inflating your tires will increase your car's fuel efficiency by 3%. Keeping your engine properly tuned, 4%, and performing regular maintenance on your vehicle, 7%. At home, turning down your heating thermostat will result in 3% energy savings per degree, while turning up your cooling thermostat will result in 6% savings per degree. Enabling the sleep feature on your computer and monitor will save 47% and 42% respectively, and replacing your old refrigerator with a new Energy Star model could save you up to 47%. As an added bonus, when you increase fuel efficiency and save energy, you save money too. If you are a spreadsheet nerd like myself, you can download the spreadsheet from the EPA Carbon Calculator and learn even more about what actions will cause which results to change based on your personal current energy consumption patterns. You can also read this guide, which is in the optional reading folder or available at this link. This helpful chart is from that document and shows how much energy a typical appliance uses per year and its corresponding cost based on national averages, so you have a better idea of which appliances are highest priority to upgrade to more efficient models or use more sparingly, and roughly how much it would cost you to replace them. People often don't know where to begin to take action toward a sustainable energy future. This pyramid helps to visualize where you are on that path. All of you should be well past the understanding stage now that you have completed this course, and you should have ideas about the low-cost or no-cost actions you can take. Maybe you have even started to take some of these actions. Hopefully some of you are already in the lighting stage, replacing energy inefficient incandescent light bulbs with CFLs or LEDs, and being conscious of how to dispose of CFLs properly due to the mercury contained in them. Some of you may even be contemplating weatherization improvements and investments in more energy efficient appliances and renewables. Or maybe you already did that before beginning this class. In any case, start somewhere and continue to take action until we have achieved the sustainable energy future you envision for you and future generations. This pyramid gives some specific examples of specific actions at each of these levels, and these are described in more detail in the course materials you read and watched for this week. As I mentioned before, don't forget that all actions have consequences, and one example of this is the switch to CFL light bulbs. If we don't take care to dispose of them properly, we will end up causing a new problem while trying to solve a different problem. Also, when making choices as a consumer, you can make a big impact by not only choosing wisely, for example, less energy and water intensive food and products, but by reducing consumption. Ask yourself, do I really need that? Visualize what will happen to that product at the end of its life, and ask yourself if it is worth it to you to have that thing, knowing all of the water and energy inputs that went into it and the waste it directly and indirectly creates. Ask yourself if you can make what you have last longer. Now that may sound a lot like President Carter's call for sacrifice, which was so unpopular, but it can also be a call for taking pride in buying and using things that last, choosing quality over quantity. Also, think beyond your own daily actions and life choices. Recognize that you have power as a citizen of a democratic nation in which you have the right and the privilege to vote. Use that power to vote for more sustainable energy policies, to elect representatives who care about energy issues and have a solid vision for change. Contact your representatives to tell them what's important to you. Hey, you can even run for office yourself if you really want to make change. These course materials have more information about what you can do in your daily life to affect change, and these resources will get you started on larger ideas like starting a project to make UMaine or another community you live in become more sustainable, or organizing a carrot mob to incentivize local businesses to change through your own purchasing power and the power of your friends. There are so many ways to make a difference. However, there are also many barriers. Some of them we use as excuses not to make progress. Some of them are real. For example, maybe you have done all of the low-cost, no-cost options that apply to you, and you really don't have the money to invest in other improvements in renewable energy. Well, if it's important to you, how might you save that money for the future? As a college student, you have a world of opportunity at your fingertips. You can choose to head down any path in life you want. Do you want to make a difference in energy issues and sustainability in your career? Get paid for it? Well, there is so much more I could say and so much more we could read, watch, and discuss, but it is time for this course to come to a conclusion. However, this need not be the end, only the beginning of your education in this subject. Many of you are in this class because you are already pursuing one of the 3 renewable energy minors across campus, or the renewable energy concentration in economics. If not, and you want to learn more, maybe even have energy be a part of your career path, check out these programs and let me know if you would like to discuss your options. Whether or not you want to make that commitment, you are welcome to enroll in ECO 405 next spring, where we go into these issues much more in depth from a policy and economic standpoint. Also, I'm serious about the Green Loan Fund. Check it out. See if you think the project you outlined for your discussion assignment 15 is something you would actually like to put into action. The money is there and it's for student projects. I would be happy to discuss supervising a project if you're interested. And check out the UMaine Sustainability website for more ways to get involved. They periodically have a calendar of events, and the sustainability coordinator would be happy to discuss how to get involved. Finally, there is power in numbers. Start a sustainable energy student club and start making changes around campus. Connect with other campuses in the UMaine system and beyond for larger impact. Again, I would be happy to discuss being a faculty supervisor. Well, thank you for your interest, involvement, and attention in this first of its kind web-based version of ECO 180. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. After completing this week's course materials, don't forget to take the Unit 4 exam. Similar to previous exams, the Unit 4 exam will consist of 20 multiple choice questions. You are not allowed to communicate with any other person while taking the exam unless you need to ask me or the TA a question to clarify something. Please review course material before beginning the exam. Make sure to study the weekly recap and introduction videos in particular. You will have 1.5 hours to complete it once you start the exam. During that time, you can log in and out of the website, shut down and restart your computer as necessary, but it will be 1.5 hours total from the moment you begin. The exam will open at 8 a.m. on Monday, May 5th, and will close at 3:30 p.m. on Friday, May 9th, the official end of the final exam period. At that point, any answers you have saved will be submitted, and if you haven't answered anything, you will receive a 0. I am also planning to launch an end of the semester survey to get more feedback on the course. More details to follow by email.